So this is your My Life. After you finish typing it, you may or may not have something along the lines of this where you've got your header up here, you've got your title, you've got your font or your text here, basically creating 3 or 4 paragraphs. When you look at My Life Part 2, the modifications, it's going to have you go through and modify certain paragraphs or certain parts of this. One of them is immediately turning off autocorrect. And if you've forgotten how to turn off autocorrect, so that's the first thing you want to do. If you go to File, Options, remember there is this button over here that says Proofing Autocorrect Options. And you may or may not remember that from 6th grade. But rather than remembering specifically what you need to uncheck or leave checked, if you can just uncheck auto format and auto format as you type, uncheck everything under those. So anything that says auto format. And what that does is these are those things that, as you're trying to do something, it tries to guess what it is it thinks you want to do, and then it starts doing it automatically for you. So many times you have to undo all of it. For example, if you're trying to type a numbered list and you don't want to use the automatic numbering, it will do it for you, which sometimes is convenient, sometimes it's annoying. So just turn it off, because you guys all know how to do numbering, and that makes it easier to control it rather than it just doing it for you. Second thing I would do is make sure that your Show Hides is turned on. Just as a reminder, right there is your Show Hides button. It's going to have you go in and highlight entire paragraphs and change alignments. Remember, right here are your 4 types of alignment: left, center, right, and then this last one called Full Justify, or sometimes just called Justify. It's going to have you go in and change for certain paragraphs line spacing. Just as a reminder, line spacing is right here, and how that is different than paragraph spacing, which is under page layout and is these settings right here. These, for the most part, should always be 0. Sometimes you'll find the after turns into 10 point. All right. Something else it wants you to do is something called a Find Replace. Most of these are on the Home button, but if you look over here way in the right side, there's a Find button and a Replace button. And those are kind of related to each other, but if I click on Replace here, what it does is it says, okay, search for something. So I'm going to search for star, the word star, and I want to replace that with VIP. And what it will allow you to do is not only find it, so it found the first time that it says star, and it gives you the option, do you want to replace it? And I'm just going to replace it, and it'll keep on going. And sometimes it'll get to the end and it'll say, do you want me to start over at the beginning? Click yes, and it starts over at the beginning again. Okay, replace that one. I would not recommend clicking replace all, because what if your middle school was called Starburg Middle School or Starburg Elementary? It would find the word star within that and replace it. So you want to kind of replace them one at a time and make sure it's actually replacing the things that you want. Okay, and I think it's oh man, there's a lot of stars in here. Okay, so now it's got them all. That's what the Find Replace, again, that's over here. If you use Find, all that does is search for it. It doesn't give you the option to replace. The next thing is having to do with graphics, and this is probably the newer stuff for you. If you go to Insert Picture or Insert Clip Art, they kind of both act the same, just Clip Art happens to be built in. The Clip Art on Office 2010 is almost 100% coming from the internet. So if you don't have an internet connection or the internet is real slow, you may find that this clip art is very slow. So I'm going to go ahead and search for something to do with camping, because I talk about it in there. And I'm just going to decide that that's right there is the picture I want. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it in the middle here. And I'm going to close out this clip art pane. And now, because I have my picture tools, formatting tools, I have a ton of different tools I can do with it. One of the first directions in there is to adjust the size of it. And right over here on the right side is the size. Now, obviously, it's 1.52 by 196 right now. I think the directions say make it 2 inches. So which one of these do you make 2 inches? I don't care. As long as one of them is 2 inches, it's trying to give a kind of an approximate size. It's also going to have you change what's called wrap text. And it automatically or by default goes in called inline with text, which means it thinks it's basically a letter. So it thinks right now, and the way it treats it is it's in the middle of that sentence that says he, she likes to run in her free time. Picture the VIP's favorite subject at school is computers. That means that it is just the same as typing in the letter A. So if you change it to something different like square, you guys have seen and know how to do this, okay? But it also, in one of the directions, has you take a clip art and do something called behind. If you go right here to behind text, one of the challenges of behind text is sometimes once it goes behind the text and I click off of it, I have trouble clicking back on it. I'm clicking all over it and it's only selecting text. I can't get back to my graphics. So the little trick is over here there's a little icon called select. Okay, it looks like an arrow. When I click on select objects, that basically changes it from text mode into graphics mode, and now it will only select graphics. Kind of an easy way to trick it into selecting graphics. The directions are going to have you put it behind the text, but that obviously makes it hard to read some of this text because there's certain parts of this graphic that are very dark. Or sometimes black, definitely depending on what kind of graphic you pick. So there are two things you want to mess with here. And depending on how big or small you have your screen right now, the color and corrections buttons might look slightly different. There might be a smaller version of it. But the first thing you want to do is go into color. And again, depending on the size of your screen, you're going to have lots of different options here. I'm going to do one that kind of washes out. So I'm going to do something along the lines of this possibly. Maybe I'll wash it out to this one. All right. And that one you can see washed it out. It's a lot easier to read. But now it's so washed out I can't even see it. So I'm going to go into corrections. And now that I've washed it out, go ahead and do some subtle corrections and say, okay, now I think maybe that one is a little easier to read the words, but also I can see the picture. And that is the correction. So being able to control your graphics using those two tools is also a huge part of it.